I'm going to be Methodist. Let's be Methodist when it comes to our doctrine. Absolutely. Just after, and this, I'll talk to Kevin Watson about this later today. After a century and a half of leaving original Methodism behind, they maintained it for about a century and a half, but they left it behind. There were a number of shifts in the mid 19th century where they really got pretty far afield from where we started, and we haven't worked our way back. So there's a legitimate question: what is Methodism? What is Methodist doctrine? So that's what I talked about the other day with the Nazarene gentleman. You know what I'm saying? What was that guy's name? Lovely gentleman. We had a great conversation, but we talked about how a lot of our theology around the fall of man, justification, sanctification, it really has been neutered. And he said, before we even understand justification correctly, we need to understand the fall of man better. And he was willing to speak more firmly than most Methodists I know. And he's a Nazarene. So what's before us is, can we even reclaim the hard, fast doctrine that we started off with, or do we need to make it all squishy and more acceptable because we don't have it in us to be countercultural? And one of the things I'm going to ask Kevin Watson later today maybe is, in one of his later chapters, I noticed yesterday, he talks about the role. Okay, we'll see if I remember to ask it this way. But he talks about how in the late 19th century, the bishops in Methodism got involved to try and keep the liberal spread from happening in the academy. They were on the right side. But then when General Conference for the MEC got together, they said, hey, bishops, stay out of our business. Well, 30, 40 years later, whenever the fundamentalist modernist debate came up, the bishops had been curtailed, right? They'd been re-socialized. And now, instead of Methodists having this conversation in earnest and this argument about how to read and follow the Bible together, liberalism predominated because the bishops no longer got involved to say, okay, here's the argument, here's what the Bible says, we're going to have this on good terms. Rather, they practice conflict avoidance. And so that's the pattern that I see established 120 years ago that pretty much guarantees that we cannot have the hard conversations that we need to within Methodism. That just became part and parcel, part of the culture that we've got. And so I want to ask Watson about how it is we get back to the original Methodism that could have hard conversations and whose doctrine could be applied in a hard, fast way to the human conditions on the ground. So I'm 100% with you. I'm advancing a certain vision of what Methodist doctrine is. And if you haven't seen it, that's on my Substack. I think, which button is? Yeah, jeffreyrickman.substack.com. I had a 12-point series on, here are 12 things that we have to reclaim about Methodism if we want to have the form and power of righteousness again. And it was a well-received series. Each article got 1,000 views at least. Some got upwards of 4,000. It just didn't get much response from the academy or from church leadership. From what I can tell, none of them even read it, and they're of the mind that they're reclaiming what needs to get reclaimed. I'm of the mind it needs to be a bit more than what we're seeing so far. So we'll see if it goes anywhere. But it's one thing to say we need to reclaim Methodism, yes, but what do we mean by that? Does, as Matt O'Reilly has his Reclaiming Methodism conference, does he have the same idea of what that looks like as what I do, as what Bishop Jones does, as what Ryan Danker does? You have these competing visions where we use the same words, but we mean different things by it. And of course, that was the dysfunction of the United Methodist Church. We all talked about Jesus, but we had different Jesuses we're talking about. We all talked about making disciples, but we meant very different things by that. Let's be really clear about what we mean right now. And then it feels like it's far away, General Conference 2026, but really, it's not far away at all. So we need to do that hard work right now to figure out who we are, what we believe, what direction we want to go. If we put that off, then the people whose full-time jobs are in church leadership are going to get their way, and I'm not sure that they see the problem the same way that I do. And I can't speak for you. And of course, there are a lot of people watching this, and you have different ideas about what went wrong. But I think now is the time to have these conversations about what went wrong, what we need to do right, what kind of leadership we need for that. And if we phone it in and we get siloed off and we're just focusing on the local church and trusting it's all going to work out at the top level, I'm pessimistic. And that's nothing against the people at the top, just to say that group dynamics are what they are. And when people sit at the top of these structures, it takes a lot of work for them to stay plugged into what's going on at the bottom. And at least in the United Methodist Church, they didn't have that in them, which is why you saw this hostile takeover from the top. I would rather not see that in the GMC.